Hello, and welcome to our webinar, The Human Spirit Through Illustration. I'm Sarah Hunter, editor of the Books for Youth section at Booklist magazine. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we will pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Links to today's slides were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. You can also download the slides at any time by copying the URL on this screen into your web browser. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Vanessa Brantley-Newton, whose picture book, Just Like Me, published in January, Oge Mora, whose picture book, The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read, also published in January of this year, and Phoebe Wall, whose picture book, The Blue House, published in August. First, we'll hear from Vanessa Brantley-Newton. Vanessa is a self-taught illustrator, doll maker, and crafter who studied fashion illustration at FIT and children's book illustration at the School of Visual Arts in New York. She is the author and illustrator of Grandma's Purse and has illustrated numerous children's books, including Sewing Stories by Barbara Herkert. Vanessa currently makes her nest in Charlotte, North Carolina with her husband, daughter, and very rambunctious cat named Stripes. Learn more about Vanessa and her artwork at vanessabrantley.newton.com and on Facebook. Welcome, Vanessa. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with everyone. I hope you all are having a great day. It is my joy to be here with you. I am, again, a self-taught illustrator. I told my mom and dad when I was a little girl that I wanted to be an illustrator, and I remember drawing on the side of the kitchen stove, and when they were cooking, it all melted down into a puddle on the floor. And I jumped back and I said, I'm an artist. And they were like, nope, you're a janitor. You're going to clean all this up. And so I ended up cleaning up the kitchen floor, but I always found somewhere to put my artwork. And so I would just put it in the closet on the baseboard. I would write in the back of my mother's books, which I suggest nobody do, but that's what I did because my parents really didn't get that I wanted to be an artist. So it was very, very difficult for me as a little girl. I was also and am dyslexic. And I also have something called synesthesia, which is the ability to see, smell, feel, taste, and hear color. And while it sounds like it might be fun, sometimes it's not. But school was very, very difficult for me. And my way of communicating was through drawing. And so I would draw everything. I would draw through class and basically failed through school. Literally, I went through, just moved into a new house and went through some paperwork and found my old report cards. And I'm also a stutterer, I'm sorry. But I also went through these report cards and burst into tears when I saw all the failing grades I had through school. And I wonder still sometimes how I got here. But it is because of my mom and dad loving me, you know, through all of this and being surrounded by a couple of teachers who really cared about me and librarians as well who knew that I loved art. And those were the people that really encouraged me and influenced me. So that is why I am here today to kind of share with these other fabulous artists, Oge and Phoebe. I am just so excited to be here. And I know you all have questions, and I have questions too that I want to ask the both of them. So I'll pass it on to our next person. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Next up, we'll hear from Oge Mora. Oge is the author and illustrator of Thank You, Omu, which won a Caldecott honor, as well as the Coretta Scott King John Steptoe New Talent Award. It was also selected as a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice staff pick and was chosen by both Publishers Weekly and School Library Journal as a Best Book of 2018. Visit her at ogemora.com. Take it away, Oge.
Hello, everyone. My name is Oge Mora, and I am an illustrator. I can't tell you how incredibly excited I am to be here today, especially I get a chance to hear from Vanessa and Phoebe. I'm overjoyed when Shorts and Wade contacted me and they were like, do you want to do this panel with Phoebe and Vanessa? Like, I wrote back to them so fast. I was like, yes, put me in there. I'm so excited. And so I'm sure I'm such a fan and can't wait to hear more about their books. But let me tell you about my book today. So I guess I'm here today to talk about this book called The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read. This is the first book that I have illustrated. My 2 previous books I had also wrote. So this is the first book I have just illustrated. And it's a book that really just crept up on me. So I first read this manuscript when I was in a bus heading to New York City to drop off artwork for my book previous from this book. And I hadn't slept in days. I was so tired and I just felt like defeated. I was just a blob on that bus. And I had gotten an email from my agent some days ago saying, you need to read this manuscript. And so I promised myself, okay, when I'm on this bus trip and it's long, I'll like read this manuscript and think about if I wanted to illustrate it. And I can always get misty-eyed talking about this because when I read a story, it was like a wind of life came up through me and it really lifted my spirit in that moment. Just hearing Mary's story and hearing her determination and her sheer will and just really reflecting on the privilege we have of reading and how beautiful that is and how books really just open up our world. And so I think I felt very grateful to have received this manuscript. I felt very honored that they thought of me, and I felt a really grave responsibility to try to get it as right as I could. So I really, really connected to this book deeply and wanted to do my very best with it. I don't know how much time I have left, but I wanted to maybe just do a show and tell of some stuff that I have around. So I'll do this very quickly. And of course, we'll like discuss things more as we have our conversation. But I just wanted to show some stuff that I had in my studio over here. So my books always start with a mood board. And so this was the mood board that I had for this particular book. And really, after I finished reading the words, I really tried to think of the color and kind of feel what colors feel right for this story. And as I read this story, immediately I just thought of the individual triumph of Mary of learning to read. Just really felt like that was characterized by a bright, bold yellow. I was also taken in by this like bold blue, open sky. And so the yellows and the blues were something that I had in mind. And so I started to kind of loop together some of my favorite artists and put them on here. So you'll see some Aaron Douglas, some Chris Ophelia, Jacob Lawrence, the whole 9 yards on like my mood board like this. And so I got some photos of Mary Walker and I did a lot of the sketches until I could take that mood board and my sketches and I just started making some preliminary paintings. And so this was an early painting I made before I started working on the artwork. I'm just sketching Mary from the different times in her life. It was very important to me that you were able to tell as Mary grew older that it was still Mary, that it was very clear who this character was as we travel with her through her life. And I think I could talk to you all day about paper. I'm legitimately obsessed, but I'll just show a little bit of the original, some of the art that I have here that I really like. This is an early piece that you'll see in the book. People are always asking me, like, how big is the artwork? My work is about to size. Sometimes the paper stuff can get small. I have like tweezers. Those help me a lot, and Q-tips. That kind of gets me through. But I particularly love this page because this is the page where Mary decides, I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn to read those words. And I loved it was kind of great as a collage artist thinking about the symbolism of these book scraps in regards to storytelling. And so it was important to me that in this page, I use book scraps to make the flames that Mary's staring at as she kind of emboldens herself and has that resolve to learn to read. I just love the idea of the words being in the flames. I don't know how long I've been talking, but I'm sure as we're discussing, we'll have a chance to share more of the things that we have. So I will let this go on to the next panelist. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Oge. That was fantastic. We will now hear from Phoebe Wall. Phoebe's work focuses on themes of comfort, nostalgia, and intimacy with nature. She grew up unschooled in Washington State and credits her free-spirited childhood in the Northwest for much of her inspiration and work ethic. She works in a variety of mediums, from watercolor and collage to fabric sculpture. Phoebe graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design with a BFA in illustration and currently lives in Bellingham, Washington. Thanks for joining us today, Phoebe.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with Vanessa and Oge. I love their work, and so I'm super excited to be here and to talk a little bit about my new book, which is called The Blue House. It came out in August. And The Blue House is about a father and son who have to unexpectedly move out of a rented home that they were living in and into a new house, find a new place to live. And so it's a lot about kind of the deep emotions associated with that. You know, I think leaving a home can really feel like losing a person, and especially in the case of this house, which gets torn down, you know, it was there one day and gone the next. So this book is all about, you know, complicated emotion and how to kind of find love and meaning in more than one place at once, you know, how to hold space for an old home that you love and also find joy in a new one. And I made this book using watercolor and collage. I think all of us are collage artists here, which is really cool because we all use the process in totally different ways. And so I made kind of a few little panels to show you of a quick tutorial of the way that I work. So I usually start with a digital sketch that I do on a Wacom Cintiq in Photoshop. And then I print that out and I trace it with a light table onto watercolor paper. So there's my pencil drawing on watercolor paper. And then I go in with watercolor paints and I do my underpainting, which is like everything that I want to, all the colors and textures I want to show through from the paper. And then I go in with all of my cut paper and I add my collaged elements. And I use all kinds of stuff for my collage. I use paste papers that I make, like these ones. I use a lot of security envelopes. This, I think, is looking kind of weird on the screen. But you can see that the little fairy's outfit is made of a painted security envelope. They always have lots of good dot and check and kind of tiled patterns. And then I use kind of miscellaneous papers and art papers and origami papers. This was one of my favorite recent papers I used that was from a chocolate bar that my mom had. And I was like, you gotta save me that paper. It's beautiful. It's like this metallic gold fibrous paper. So there's the collaged elements on. And then I go in again with paint, either watercolor, acrylic, gouache, and also colored pencils. I have my Prismacolor pencils that I love. And I go in and I add all my details with those. So that's kind of a little quick rundown of the process I use to make this book. And I think I find a lot of joy in making my illustrations really super detailed and colorful and tactile. And to me, that really kind of adds to the sense of home in this book, was wanting lots of texture and color for viewers to dig into. I think, you know, things like textiles on couches and blankets and t-shirts can really make a visual space, you know, into a home. You know, we're surrounded by, as you can see, I'm surrounded by so many different patterns and colors. And to me, that really kind of evokes comfort and home. And so I wanted to bring that into the book. And I think collage is a great way to do it. So that's a little bit about my process and my book. And I'm excited to talk more.
Thanks so much, Phoebe, Oge, and Vanessa. Now that you've all had a chance to tell us more about your stories and processes, we'll transition into the panel portion of today's webinar. Please go ahead and unmute yourselves and start your videos, and I will start asking questions. And I will start my video too. There we go. Hello. Before we get started, I just want to say I'm really glad my video was off because I was making like such ecstatic, delighted faces over here while you guys were all talking about your processes, because I love picture book illustration and I find this so fascinating, and I'm just really happy to be able to talk to you about it today. So to start, how about we talk about some of the techniques you use in a little bit more detail. All of your books do a really vivid and rich job of cultivating emotion or atmosphere or place, and I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the techniques you use in your illustration to evoke those feelings. Vanessa, why don't we start with you since you spoke first? Oh, you're muted still, Vanessa.
Can't hear you.
There you go.
Unmute. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so in doing Just Like Me, I painted all the papers for this book, and I used basically everything I could possibly find. When dealing with mood, I told you I'm dyslexic, and I'm also a stutterer, and I have something called synesthesia, which is the ability to see, smell, feel, and taste color. So color is very, very important to me in picture books. Some people can work that minimal color thing or just do a 2-color process or maybe a 3-color. For me, all the colors speak, and yellow in particular is the color that I run to. So like when Oge talked about her cover that she did, I was like, yeah, I went and picked up the book and I saw the yellow and I just grabbed it. It speaks to me. Yellow tastes like pickles. It is my favorite color of all colors. And it varies as I get older. I find it changes. When I was a child, red was the color that I liked. Then when I got in middle school, blue was the color that really spoke to me. When I got older, it was pink. And now that I'm almost 60, yellow is just in the closet. It's the color I feel. It's the color that makes me feel good. And I find it lightens people's spirits as well. Okay, so when I was doing this book, I really wanted the skin to pop for this little girl. And she was literally cut out of cardboard. I don't have any of the pieces here because they're still with Random House. But I cut out the pieces and I layered them on top of each other. And so it really had a dimensional feel to it. And so, you know, talking sometimes about my process is a little difficult because I'm a musician. And so music is like the big painting part of what I do. To get emotion and feeling, I put on the music. And so I'm playing anything from Nina Simone to Yo-Yo Mas. I'm playing everything in my studio. And there's this one young lady, Shantae Can, who I listen to so much, it's ridiculous. Between she and another group called Moonchild, I am constantly listening to those two all day long, and it puts me in a mood. And what I really wanted for little girls to feel was that I get you. I see you, I understand you, and it took me back to my childhood. And so that's what I wanted, you know, when people picked up the book or when somebody read the poem, that they, wow, that's how I felt when I was a kid. Because it's really, you know, we talk about so many things that make us different, but really what makes us different tends to also make us the same. And that, you know, there are days when you get pimples on your face. There are days when you don't like your hair or you don't like your skin, you know, and I wanted to put every little girl from every culture in this book so that when they got this book, they would go, wow, Miss Vanessa saw me. She saw me and she put me in a book. And that's why, you know, I have that feeling. It was, I know what it's like to be left out. I know what it's like to be picked on because your skin is brown. I know what it's like to be picked on because you just don't fit in. You are different, you know, and we're taught that different is bad. And now we're in this place where young people, they ain't having it no more. You gonna accept me or step off, one or the other. And I wanted to kind of give girls that up of, I like me, I like you, you're just like me, I'm just like you, and we can vibe together. That's what this book is about.
That's awesome. I love that connection between you and Oge on yellow in particular. And Oge, I wonder if we could turn to you next and you can talk a little bit about how you cultivate emotion and atmosphere in your artwork. And I'd love to hear more about color in particular, since you talked a little bit about that in your presentation.
Of course. I think just based on like what I heard Phoebe say and what Vanessa's also shared, I love that we're all collage artists. I think one of my favorite things about collage is it's like the perfect medium between like intention, like the things that we plan, but then also improvisation, you know? I also love that there are no rules to it, you know, where everything goes, you know, it's just such a fun-loving, free-loving space that is just really magical. And it's so great kind of seeing how you might have an idea of how a collage is gonna go. And that collage is like, I'm gonna go this way. And you just kind of get pulled along with it. And I think that's what's so magical about this medium and why it kind of grabs you in and it just never lets you go. I also love how collage, there's always an inherent understanding of time, you know, and memory. When you're bringing all these bits of things together and you're kind of creating these new memories, these new experiences. I just think I also love when people was talking about security envelopes, because I like literally eyeballed one of my drawers over there. And I was like, I thought I was the only one. I have a bill, and then I throw the bill, and I'm like, woohoo, this is awesome.
Woo, yes.
I'll see one at other people's houses and be like, can I have that? I don't have that.
Yes, or like someone will send me a birthday card, and I'm like, oh, thank you, and I slide the card. That's just like such a magical thing about this medium. It's just really, as a lover of collage, I always love hearing people art talk collage because it gets me excited because I'm like, it's so great, right? I love it.
I'm gonna return to collage in a little bit, but I wonder if, Phoebe, if you could talk a little bit about, okay, were you not done? I'm sorry. Do you have more to say before we move on?
Since you asked me, see, I'm a very wordy individual.
Okay.
So you'll have to rein me in, because if once it becomes a step I really like, hence collage, I will talk and talk and talk. But very briefly, will actually answer your question.
Okay.
So yeah, color. Well, I think I touched on it a lot earlier, but color is definitely the number one mode in which I use to evoke emotion. It's the first thing you experience in a piece. It's that immediate color payoff. You know, that yellow, that bold orange, that red, how it makes you feel, how it makes you kind of walk into the story. And one of the things that was a big part of the story for me is how Mary's life is opened up once she experiences reading. And so as if you look through this book, I was very careful when I was placing that yellow. And so early on, you'll see lots of blues, a lot of muted tones, creams that kind of speak to like yellowed, faded pages, until there are just little moments, like the Freedom Road page, you'll see the spots of yellow. When Mary first receives that Bible, we'll see that spark of yellow, until we finally have that page where she learns to read and it's engulfed in yellow. She's wearing yellow, and this is also the first time that I use book scraps on her actual person, where she can finally kind of wear those pages. And the cool thing is, after this big bold yellow page, the overall color palette becomes a lot more colorful. Suddenly we have the yellows and spots of pinks, and it's like the whole kind of world is now fully realized once she's had that achievement. And so it's always kind of interesting how really color is the first thing that touches us when we read picture books. And so that's the number one medium, number one aspect I think of when I'm making my illustrations.
Thank you. Wonderful. All right, Phoebe, tell me a little bit how you use your artwork to cultivate a sense of atmosphere or emotion or place.
Yeah, I think this book in particular was an interesting one for sense of place and emotion because this story is based on a true story. It's based on my partner and his son's experience of having to leave their house. And so the whole thing takes place, you know, in an imaginary place that's basically the city that I live in Northwestern Washington. And so I feel like a huge way that I kind of dealt with sense of place in this story especially, and I think in most of my work, is I often make things just really specific. So I'm usually really specific with the Northwest environment that I'm illustrating because it's one that I'm really familiar with. And I often, you know, I use some photo references, but most of the time I'm just drawing from my imagination, which I also feel like it creates a unique sense of place that's kind of somewhere in between reality and this kind of, you know, magical in-between world. So I really feel like details is a huge part of what I use to create sense of place, is lots of specificity. And in this book especially, you know, I was illustrating a house from my own memory of it, a house that's no longer there. But a lot of the possessions from that house still live in the house that I live in now. They came with us to this new house. So, you know, I was thinking about what records the family would be listening to in the book and making my own little pun versions of the records. You know, what kind of art they have on the walls, the textiles and blankets they have in their home, what they're cooking. And I really like to have that intimate relationship, whether it's a real house that I've been to or not. You know, I always like to think about, what does the house I'm illustrating smell like? You know, what do these textures that I'm collaging and painting feel like? Because I really think that comes across when an illustrator or an author like has a really intimate personal knowledge of the space. And so I love using details. There's one thing that I put all over in this book, which is yogurt containers. You can count I think 7 different yogurt containers in this book. And I really feel like that is something that creates that sense of place and that specificity and speaks to a real family experience. I feel like every family has some reused object that just exists everywhere in a house. And in this book, you know, they're using it to transform the walls on their house, to put paint in, and they're using it to put clothespins in and pens in. And I just feel like adding little details like that to me is what kind of transforms just any old little house in a picture book into a real home.
That's really interesting. It's funny that you mentioned the smell. I've been to Bellingham quite a lot, actually. My grandparents lived there.
Oh, wow.
And I know exactly what sort of smell you're talking about. And there's something about the trees and the ocean in the Pacific Northwest that the smell is very tied to that visual feel. And I felt like I noticed that and I loved it.
Thank you.
And there was a good personal connection for me that made me feel a little homesick, actually.
Oh, I'm not happy that you're homesick, but I'm happy that the feelings came across. Yeah, I know there's one scene in the book that's a beach scene, and that one is definitely very Northwest specific because I think I got to really dig in with the trees and plants and rocks and seaweed and stuff that really is indicative of this place.
Yeah.
And that was a really fun spread to do in the book because every other spread I was having to basically just repeat different rooms and different views of the same house or the same neighborhood or the same people. And that was the one spread where I was like, oh my God, I don't have to reference any other page that I'm doing. And it felt so good.
So we've talked a lot about collage already, but I'm curious, because all three of you do it, what are some individual pieces of paper that were important to you to include, or materials at all, that doesn't have to be paper, that you included in your illustration that were meaningful to these books? Okay, can we start with you? Because I know you talked about that a little bit already. You touched on it.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So as we were talking about earlier, everything goes with collage. And so but something that was particularly interesting in this book was Mary lived to be 106, I think she was 118 or 121.
I think it was 121.
Yeah, 121. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
But Yeah, so she lived a very, very long life. And so if you think about it, you have a whole kind of century that you're like traveling through.
Yeah.
And so it was really kind of important for me, like as I was like thinking of my regular kind of book scraps, was utilizing book scraps from the particular eras, or like thinking about like the color palettes for those kind of eras and things like that. And so like I was able to find newspapers from like the 1800s and things like that from like one of these bookstores I love to venture through and try to weave them. Another thing you'll see in a lot of the papers that I painted myself in this book is one of the line that really struck me with this book was, "Your civil rights are in these pages." I just kept repeating it and repeating it. And so in a lot of like the papers that I have, like in the skies and in like the backgrounds and the clouds and things like that, you can see it a lot in, especially in the Endpapers scraps. I have it scribbled in cursive all the way throughout. Your civil rights are in these pages. And I wrote them and I paint on top of it and I write it again. So it's kind of like embedded in there. So that was another thing to take advantage of. And Phoebe touched upon this also. One of the things that is kind of sad about bringing something to like the actual book format is that the original collage, so much about what's so just this amazing about this medium is the surface, you know?
Yeah.
The tactileness, the texture of it.
Yes.
And so that was also something as I was making a lot of these pieces, is that I really kind of tried to really layer it so you could at least see some of the ripples. But that's the kind of nice thing about when you have like the actual artwork, that even as I was working on it, I would just kind of put my hand across it and experience in that way. So I'm like, I can't exactly reproduce that for everyone, but so I tried to emphasize as much in the papers that I was choosing for it.
Yeah, I love that about collage too. That tactile element is just so satisfying.
So beautiful.
So Vanessa, why don't we turn over to you with this question? What are some elements that you incorporated into the collage in your illustrations for this book that were important to you?
You know, when we first started working on the book, Kelly Delaney is my editor, and Kelly let me basically do what I wanted to do. And I really wanted, much like the girls, every different girl that was going to read this book, I wanted every different texture, every different crayon color thing, anything different I could throw in there to kind of reflect the reader that was going to be there. There are some girls who have kinky curly hair. There are other girls who have long silky hair. There are girls who have beautiful chocolate skin. There are other girls who have beautiful manila type skin. And I wanted every girl to kind of look and feel something from it. And we wanted to name the book in the beginning. I called it Girl Canvas. That's what I wanted to be, because I feel like adults write on us with words. And sometimes those words are not, how can I say, not positive words. They can be very, very negative words, because sometimes we're looking for adults to give, or us, or parents to give us what they never got. And so one of my first poem was, I am a canvas. And it goes, I am a canvas being painted on by the words of my family, friends, and community. Sometimes the words are painted with blacks and grays that leave me feeling confused. Other times the palette is filled with blues that make me want to scream and holler in a bluesy kind of way. I'm not feeling it today. And then there are days when pinks and purples flow over my canvas and give me hope, like the sky, for a different tomorrow. And then there are paints that I get to choose: greens, yellows, oranges, and blues. And so when I began to paint this, I really wanted to put that texture of the canvas there. Because this little girl and other little girls like her, they get to paint their own canvas, regardless to what the world says about them, or what an adult or a broken person says. I wanted to give them something that would heal them, and color is so healing. And so I did it on this manila paper that kids get in school. And And I find it works so good with like the, I use acrylic paint.
Mm-hmm.
And this is basically what I painted on the other side.
Oh, I love that.
That's awesome.
And so with my family of sisters over there, I got these
Yes!
too. Yeah. But even the yellow paper that I use in the background there, I painted that.
Yeah.
And I, just wanted to kind of fill it up with texture so that they could run their hands across it. And then Kelly gave me the best surprise. When the book was published, they gave it a canvas feel to it. So while I couldn't call it girl canvas, I still got the canvas feel.
That's fantastic. I'm so interested in the way color communicates emotion. And I know for you, it has like a specific connection. But I wonder, I know I asked about this before, but are there other colors that have that sort of meaningful, well, I guess meaning for you? Is there like another color that you really latch onto in your illustrations that has like a specific meaning for you with your synesthesia?
For me, blue.
Blue?
Blue is a stabilizer for me. It's also balance and harmony for me.
Interesting.
And so I love to have that in there. Blue is that color, but also there are three colors in particular, which are the oranges, the reds, and the fuchsia pinks. Those together is like, it's like here, you ever heard of a group called Take Six?
Uh-huh.
Okay. It's like Take Six singing. That's what it's like. That's what it sounds like to me. Every time I put those freaking colors together, it just takes me over the moon. And I could just sing a song looking at those colors. They literally do something to my heart. And I gotta put it everywhere. Birds flying high, you know how I feel. It's got to come out. And it just puts me in a jazz mood. I want to fly. I want to do something. I want to throw paint. It just makes me feel good. So it's that orange, that red, and that pink together. It is just everything to me. I love it.
That's amazing. I just love hearing about it. It's so great. There's something, I mean, I feel like I'm sort of dancing around this, but like communicating with pictures is so different than communicating with words. And I think you're really touching on it in what you're talking about here, that you tap into something that's like deeper than language with images. And it's so powerful just for everybody, but also for kids who are just learning how to read. And that's really the audience for a lot of these picture books here. So I'm always enamored by picture book illustrations. I think they're just fantastic. So I have one of my questions is what inspired your illustrations for these books, but I feel like we have covered that a lot. So I'm going to ask a question from our audience here that I've seen recurring a couple of times. A lot of people want to know about end papers. Do you make decisions about end papers? Do you think about end papers when you're making your artwork? Phoebe, we haven't heard from you in a little while. Do you want to talk about end papers?
Yeah, so for this book specifically, it has really complicated end papers. And I'll show you. The first one is the neighborhood that my characters live in, kind of at the time that the story starts. So you can see their house, the blue house is right there. And then at the end, this was the first time I'd done end papers that change from the beginning to the end. And so at the end, we see the neighborhood as it's kind of changing. Their house has been torn down and there's a new house in the process of being built. And you can see that there's like some sold signs. And we can also see, you know, a happy thing of their new little house that was for rent in the first one. You know, they've made it their home with the trampoline and the sunflowers and their truck is outside. So these ones were interesting because, and I saw that Catherine, hi Catherine, my editor is, I think, watching, and Catherine Harrison at Knopf was like the main reason that I did these end papers, because I originally wanted to do the pattern that is now on the like hardcover.
Mhm.
And I was kind of like, I just want to do a pattern that's like drawing all these little objects from the interior. And Catherine was like, no, I think we need to do like a zoom out of the neighborhood, and we need to show how it's changing, because we don't really see that in that scope within the pages. You know, we see little bits of it, but if we could take that chance to tell more of the story. And I really dragged my feet and was like, no, I think we should do the pattern. And most of it was rooted in like, I do not want to draw this because it's so like huge and complicated that I was done with the book, and it had taken me a really long time, and I'd just been working really intensively on it. So I was just kind of like, no, I don't think it should be that. And she was like, no, I really think it should. And I knew she was right, and I was just resisting because I was exhausted. But I'm really, really grateful that she pushed me to tell that little extra bit of the story. And this is just one thing I love about working with a team, is that there's people who, you know, hold you accountable and kind of like push you to work a little harder and be a little bit more creative. Because now I'm so grateful. I think that the Endpapers are one of my favorite part of the entire book. And I do think it's really nice to see that kind of zoomed out vision of the neighborhood, so that you can orient yourself within the book. And, you know, you can see their old house, you can see their new house, you can see the neighbors' houses that are being torn down or developed, like they talk about within the story. So I really think with this book especially, it was a great way to tell more of the story without words and in more of a subtle way. And I'm just really grateful that Catherine pushed me on that.
Yeah, well, I have to say too, there's another book that Phoebe did that I just got, and it's the story of the little girl with the chicken.
Yeah.
And I gravitated, I mean, as soon as I saw it, I grabbed it off the shelf. I didn't even think about it, grabbed it off the shelf and took it to the cash register, bought it, got home and opened it up. And the feelings from that red and that wine and all of those earthy colors in there gave me such a feeling that I could feel the air around. I could literally hear the chickens, and it was fabulous. I mean, even down to the chicken coop, you know, when they're coming out, you know, she's following the chicken out of the chicken coop. It was amazing. And I just want to say, to the power of illustration, Sarah, what you were saying, you know, sometimes I'm just going to be really, really honest, because we're just going to have a real conversation.
Great.
There are times when I get with writers who basically look down on illustrators, like you know, that's not important. And I'm like, they call it a picture book.
Yeah.
They call it a picture
You're
book.
right.
Pictures are very, very powerful. And especially for people like myself who are dyslexic. When I sat on Miss Russell's lap at 5 years old and she opened up The Snowy Day to me, I never remember the words. And the words were very powerful. They were beautifully written. But it was those pictures that spoke to me. Seeing a brown woman, and you have to excuse me if I get a little emotional, seeing a brown woman in a yellow gingham house dress, the same yellow gingham house dress that my mother had, down to the wallpaper that he used, that he got from a store and brought a piece of wallpaper into it. These things influenced me even as a collage artist, to bring those same elements in to make children feel what I felt. And what I felt was, somebody saw me. I'm not invisible, because for such a long time, I swore I was invisible. Nobody can see me. I don't exist, because there are no books about brown people that look like me. And then here comes this beautifully illustrated brown boy, simply illustrated. Not a whole lot of line, but a red snowsuit. So you can't miss me. It's like, you know, Oprah Winfrey in The Color Purple. There's a scene where she and Suge Avery are saying, you know, God created purple, and I guess he did it because you just can't walk by the color purple and ignore it. And so seeing this brown skin in a red snowsuit was like the epitome of, damn it, I'm here. I'm here. What? It was fantastic. And so I want to give that to readers. I want to do what Ezra Jack Keats did for me, you know, with that. So, you know, Phoebe and Oge, they, you know, they do something so powerful with paper that I think influences even adults to, you know, kind of slow down just a little bit, and even hopefully writers to look and go, wow, they took my words and they took paper and they cut it out and they put it on paper and they made something to not just go with my words, but to enhance and give other feel to what I'm saying. So,
I just want to add to just the sermon that Vanessa just gave us right now. I've been blessed. But yeah, that's the magic of illustration. That's how, like, down to the actual word. My favorite thing about illustration is just the bones of the word itself. It's to illuminate, to bring light to, you know, that's such, I think that we play such a powerful role in today's society, especially when we think about what stories are you bringing light to? Who are you bringing light to? Who are we bringing to the surface? Who are we celebrating, you know? And I always talk about one of the things that really is the most powerful thing about collage is a lot of the scraps and the things we use are just using old security envelopes. This isn't stuff that's like $10 million, you know? This is stuff that everyone has in their backyard. It's common, it's everywhere. We overlook it. But somehow, if I snip the right section, or I put just the right wash of color, and I put it on the page, it's all this beauty is revealed. And so whatever I think about the books that I like, the stories I like to tell, and a lot of these stories deal with ordinary people, and they're not big stories, they're not princesses and dragons, just really simple stories rooted in people. But it's how we tell these stories that really kind of reveals the magic that's all around us, reveals the magic in these ordinary, these small moments that we have in our lives.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think, at least in my connection to collage, is when I think about these bright, bold colors I love to use in my work, it's the celebration. It's about joy. Joy on every single page. A lot of times I'm told people think my books are sweet, and sometimes they're complimenting me and sometimes they're not complimenting me, but I always take it as a compliment, because why not? You know, we live in a complicated and sometimes just exhausting world. What's so wrong to be able to take refuge in a book? You know, the thing of what's so powerful about Keats' work, what's so powerful about a book like Just Like Me, is Vanessa, like Keats, has carved a space out for a child to take refuge in from the harshness of everything that they deal with every day. That book is that dose of love, that warmth that they need in that moment, that we can like return to these books, and we can have homes in these books, and these books can touch us and comfort us when we need it most. And as you think about the power of that experience that we create for the littlest among us, the most vulnerable among us, it's a really intimidating profession. At least I think so. But yes, truly, it's a really special thing that we do, and especially in such an incredible medium.
And I think too, just to return to that point, your book in particular really speaks to that power. I'm thinking especially about how the words for Mary Walker in the beginning are just squiggles, and you put squiggles on the page. And then at the end, when the color pops and you see actual letters, and she can recognize those letters too, that the empowerment and positivity of that ability is just laid so bare in that quick change from like a squiggle to a recognizable letter. And you don't need to be able to read if you're like 3 or 4 years old and can't read yet. You can see the difference between a squiggle and a letter, and you know the change that happened there because of the power of that small change in the illustration. And I think that is really wonderful too. We were talking about Endpapers, weren't we?
See, you have to watch me.
It's okay. We were talking about Endpapers. And I have one more question left that I'd really like to get to. So I think like we'll move on from Endpapers to this last question, and then we can wrap up after that. But I feel like you've probably all sort of touched on this a little bit, but if you could end on what's one thing you hope your illustrations communicate to your readers? And does that change from book to book, or do you find yourself returning to that theme or focus throughout your work? Phoebe, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. I think, throughout all of my books, one thing that kind of recurs a lot is kind of like attention to individual worlds, whether they're more like fantastical worlds, like in my second book, Backyard Fairies, or the world within this home in the Blue House, or the relationship world and home in Sonia's Chickens. And I think one thing that recurs for me, and I think this, kind of goes back to my childhood and the way that I was educated, is like freedom for kids, freedom to feel their feelings, trust in kids, to, have their own experiences and communicate their feelings and, have independence. That feels definitely like it's a big recurring thing for me. And just kind of, really digging into this detail that I think can create so much magic in kids' books. Like I was really relating to a lot of what Oge was saying about, how we are really able to create these really powerful worlds for kids. And I was at, my mom's house right before COVID, right before quarantine, and she'd gotten out this book that was one of mine from when I was a kid, but it wasn't one that I took with me when I moved or anything like that. It was one that kind of existed in the background. But when I opened it, I immediately knew every detail in the book, like it was a part of my body, like it was a memory. Like I was like, oh, like I remember the person in this book and exactly what they're doing, just like I remember this real thing that happened to me. And I love the way that books kind of become a part of you, and the way that these teeny details in books become a part of you. And so I feel like for me, the stories might be different and the settings might be slightly different, but I feel like there's always some tiny little detail world to get lost in and dig into, whether it's like fairies dancing under a log or, like all of the little tchotchkes and things in a messy house. So for me, I think really digging into the details is a big thing. And I think also just kind of figuring out how to continue to bring, more different kinds of kids into the pages of my books. Like Vanessa's talking so much about, representation in books and how important it is for kids to feel seen. And I think there's so many different ways that shows up. And for me, figuring out how, like I did in Backyard Fairies, to show kids who aren't like a thin, white girl, or, I think like body diversity for me has been a big thing of trying to begin incorporating into my work, as far as telling my own story and remaining true to the experience I know, and also trying to give kids a way to see themselves in the pages of books.
Great. Vanessa, how about we turn to you next? What's one thing you hope your illustrations communicate to readers, and does that change, or do you have like a through line for your work?
Oh, I'm sorry, was that for me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, ask again, something's wrong with the connection, but.
Oh, sorry, there you are.
I was like, I saw you disappear. Look, where'd you go?
I'm sorry, you were saying, Sarah.
Sure. What's one thing that you hope your illustrations communicate to readers, and does that change from book to book, or do you find you have a through line in all of your work?
I think mine would be, I see you. I see you. It was so important to me as a child to not be ignored, and I kind of felt ignored because of my hair, because of my skin. As Phoebe said, even, for some people, it could be weight. It could be a bunch of different things. Not seeing yourself in a wheelchair, not seeing yourself as a child who, or an adult who may be gay, to not be able to be seen. It just says that people don't, you don't see me. And we all should be seen. That's the thing. And so I want children to know, I see you. And I'm not just this advocate for brown children only. I am for children, period. I need people to really get that. I'm about the kid. I could care less about the adults sometimes. It is children need to know that they are loved. Babies don't come here hating. We teach them to hate. And I want them to, when they look at the work that I do, Miss Vanessa loves me and she feels me and she sees me. So I want that through all the books that I do.
Wonderful. That's great. All right, Oge, let's end with you on this question. What's one thing you hope your illustrations communicate to readers, and does that change, or do you have a through line?
I think I touched on a couple of things, but I just want to say, I just very recently met Vanessa in person, and this is the first time I'm at least video chatting with Phoebe. But what's been kind of interesting is, even though before I had met Vanessa and before I had met Phoebe, even though I didn't know them personally, it was like I knew them because I knew their work. That I was able to kind of look and experience their books and see the person and see all of the love and the care, and I see that joy, see that just whenever I think about Phoebe's work, there's a coziness. It makes me feel warm and cared for. Like I have a mug of cocoa somewhere. And I think of Vanessa's work always makes me smile. Her kids are always so joyful and free that I can't not be happy and look at all those colors and the whole festival, all the textures that she uses. And I mean, when I think about my work, that's exactly it. Like I want my work to feel like a warm hug. I want it to make you smile. I want it to make you feel happy. I want it to give you hope. You know, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell a story that maybe is a little darker or things like that. And those stories are just as important. But I think for me, whenever I collage, it's a safe space. It's a healing space. I think when Vanessa said that color was healing, that truly touched me. It truly is. The right shade of blue just, it'll hit you right in your heart. I could get emotional even thinking about it. And so if my work could be a little bit of balm, a little bit of just an opportunity to rest, to relax, to smile, that's what every book, if I want it to give you that feeling. If you can take that book and find a little room for it in your heart, that's everything that I could have ever asked for. So.
For the record, I think your books definitely do that.
Yeah.
They really do.
Here.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. This has just been the most wonderful conversation. I have had such a nice time talking to all of you. This has been illuminating and empowering and just lovely. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to all of us and letting our audience know about your process and your inspiration. It's been a real pleasure. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, certificate of completion, and video recording. And for more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit www.booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones, like the ones you see here. If you haven't already, be sure to check out the Booklist Reader, where Booklist contributors post daily about all things books and library land. Did you know that Booklist content is freely available to all until the end of this month? Start reading with our digital edition, a format that pairs the page-by-page reading experience of print with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com, and lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of this special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Thank you truly again for joining us for today's webinar, and one more thank you to our sponsor, Random House Children's Books. This concludes today's webinar.